for Education and Practice, and I'm joined today by several of my ASPPH colleagues. Today's webinar will feature Dr. Patrick Lenahan of the University of Illinois at Chicago School of Public Health, Dr. Rita DeBate of the University of South Florida College of Public Health, and Drs. Ian Lapp and Peter Berman of the Harvard School of Public Health, as well as today's moderator, Dean Jim Rosinski of the Faye W. Boozman College of Public Health at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences, who served as the chair of the Framing the Future DrPH expert panel, and special guest, Dean Donna Peterson of the University of South Florida College of Public Health, who also serves as the chair of the Framing the Future Task Force. This webinar is the fourth of the 2014-2015 ASPPH Presents series, which has been designed as a service to CEIF-accredited ASPPH member schools and programs of public health. A few housekeeping items of note. Due to the nature of this presentation format, there may be a slight delay in the advancement of presentation slides. Additionally, while you are in listen-only mode and your lines have been muted, we encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation by using the question box. Questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Please be sure to refrain from placing your line on hold during the webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will be archived on the event page on the ASPPH website soon. Additionally, this webinar has been approved for 1 hour of CPH continuing education credit. I will now turn over to our special guest, Dean Donna Peterson.
Thanks, Sarah, and hello, everyone, and welcome to this program today. It has truly been my honor and pleasure to chair the Framing the Future Task Force over the past 3 years. I've also had the privilege of overseeing the work of our expert panels, which is where the real work has taken place. And I've thoroughly enjoyed traveling around the country, listening to folks, their ideas, their dreams, and also learning about the ideas that are already being put into practice as we seek to transform curricula in public health for our students, for our workforce, and for the future. As I've said many times, this journey has always been about the conversation, and so I'm particularly pleased that so many of you have joined us today to participate in this conversation about new ideas and new trends in our DrPH programs. And with that, I will happily turn it over to Jim Rosinski, who you've already heard was the chair of the expert panel, and I must say he is an extraordinary leader who did a terrific job with this work. The panel worked very, very hard, took in all the comments that I had heard around the country and came up with a phenomenal product, and you're going to hear some great ideas today. Thank you, Jim, and with that, I will turn it over to you.
Hey, Jim, we can't hear you, so make sure you take yourself off mute.
Okay, that should be better now. Good morning or afternoon, everybody, depending on where you are. It's certainly a pleasure to be involved in presenting this webinar to you, as well as a pleasure to really chair the expert panel, and before that, ASPPH's core competency development model for the DrPH. You should have received in the information that was sent to you prior to the webinar, a list of supplemental materials, pre-reading materials. Hopefully you've had a chance to look over them. If you haven't, we would strongly encourage you to do so. It contains the latest definition or summary of the definition of a credit hour, as well as the websites for the 3 panelists that you'll hear today. Next slide, please. The takeaways from this webinar are listed here. Basically describe the 3 key sections of the expert panel's report. Explain how the 3 schools have changed their curricula in response to this report, and reflect on the objectives of the programs that you're going to hear, and how that influences the DrPH degree programs offered at those institutions. Next slide, please. I probably don't need to tell anyone on this webinar that, ASPPH has been involved for a long time in thinking about the DrPH. But formally, things got kicked off in about 2007 with the DrPH core competency development model. It came out as a subcommittee of the Education Committee and worked for 2 years obtaining input from a diverse group of constituents from across the country, both in academia and in the practice community, resulting in the publication of the version 1.3 of the DrPH core competency model in 2009. I encourage you to look at that. The expert panel's work was not to duplicate what had been done in that core competency development model, but to really look towards the future in the DrPH development and provide some guidance to programs in their thinking about implementing DrPH programs or revising DrPH programs. Next slide, please. The report, as you've probably seen already, hopefully you've had a chance to read it, is broken out in 3 major sections: key considerations, design elements, and critical content, really modeled after what the MPH expert panel has done. Next slide, please. I'm not going to spend any time going over a summary of those 3 sections. The expert panel worked for a full year starting in January of 2014 and really defining the bullets, the items beneath each of the 3 major areas. And those review of those can do a much better job summarizing the panel's report than I can in a few short sections. But there are 3 take-home points that I think kind of guided the work of the panel. One is that the DrPH degree will continue to grow in value and enrollment of students in the future, particularly as health systems continue to evolve over time. Secondly, the DrPH graduates will be transformative leaders with expertise in evidence-based public health practice and research. Research was explicitly mentioned, and that's part of the core competency model as well, the thinking that went behind the core competencies. And the final point is that the DrPH graduates will increasingly be involved in educational roles at both the graduate and undergraduate levels. Next slide, please. And with that note, I'll turn things over to Patrick.
Thank you, Jim. As Dr. Brzezinski pointed out, Framing the Future is the latest in a series of consensus recommendations regarding the focus and content of the DrPH degree. Here at UIC, we have used this along with other writings on the DrPH and public health practice education and leadership that have come out over the past 10 years to guide us for how our DrPH program should evolve. Our program goes back to the beginnings of the school, now 40 years ago, and since that time has undergone 2 transformations. First, about a decade ago, to establish a new identity comparable to but different from the PhD, and most recently, about 4 or 5 years ago, to offer the program in an online format. Framing the Future is very comprehensive, covering many aspects of the DrPH, so it would be difficult to see it as a blueprint to be followed literally. We have used it more as a roadmap to gauge our progress regarding the path that we're taking in restructuring our DrPH, recognizing that as a map it is not the terrain. Next slide, please. Having said that, there are 3 elements of our program which resonate most strongly with Framing the Future recommendations. The practice orientation, the focus on leadership, and the emphasis on the evidence base of practice. And I'd like to talk about these in a little more detail in the time I have. Next slide, please. First, these features are central to our program and not just descriptive terms, and you can see this as they are reflected in our mission statement. You can also see, though, in the mission statement there are other program elements central to our view of leadership in public health practice, the role of policy, systems development, the importance of driving change, which is central to adaptive leadership, fostering innovation as another key element. if we look a little more detail at how we have enacted these, next slide, individually. In the practice orientation, we have focused our program on mid-career professionals who already have either leadership potential and management experience and require that they maintain their practice connection, because the program is experience-based in its approach. We recognize that you don't teach leadership per se, but what we do is create the environments where leadership can be learned by the students. We use action learning as a key process for both organizational learning and for leadership development. Also reflecting the emphasis on practice, we have a competency-based framework and a portfolio, which I'll talk more about, to be able to gauge students' learning experience and their readiness to proceed to the dissertation phase. And then the distance format is intended not just to be able to draw a broader market of students, but to increase the diversity of students in the cohort, so that they have this opportunity to be able to recognize that diversity is a key to effective leadership development. Next slide, please. Our focus on adaptive leadership may not be unique, but we have tried to dig more deeply into the practice of adaptive leadership and have identified 6 critical skill areas which are integrated into the curriculum, which you see here on this slide. Likewise, reflection is an integrative leadership skill that is widely recognized as a distinguishing leadership characteristic, but is not often emphasized in leadership training. We teach both theory and practice of systematic reflection, and students have the opportunity to learn the application of systematic reflection throughout the curriculum. Next, please. We see the ability to contribute to the knowledge base of the field as a hallmark of doctoral level education, but we approach it from a practice perspective, which reverses the translational research thinking, which is more traditional in public health. We start with the practice problem, which usually involves an adaptive challenge, and in resolving that problem, generate knowledge that can be applied to similar problems elsewhere or in the future. Knowledge generation or evidence must be explicit, or be an explicit residual of problem solving. And with that orientation, you can see that there are several ways that this can be done beyond the direct effort to generate practice-relevant knowledge, the traditional translational research approach, including applying evidence in innovative ways, appraising evidence, and the innovative use of data for driving decisions in the public health system. Next, please. Also, while using a portfolio in a DrPH program may not be unique, but how we use it, I think, helps you to see how it helps tie together the elements of our program and the role that it plays in being more than just a replacement for the qualifying exams or prelims that are often used in doctoral programs. We build the portfolio around the 6 program competencies. Its focus is beyond the program contributions, but also pulls in the broader professional and academic experiences that students bring to the program. Students both use and demonstrate their competencies in systematic reflection in selecting evidence of mastery and their ability to be adaptive leadership and adaptive leaders and apply skills of adaptive leadership. The portfolio is assembled over a period of 2 to 3 years as students move through the program, learn how to do systematic reflection and how adaptive leadership is different than perhaps a more traditional notion of leadership that they brought into the program. I mentioned that we are competency-based, and our competencies are very much reflective of the ASPPH competency model, but as you can see here that there is a different emphasis in that model, from that model, which I think reflects our understanding of what approaches to leadership are best suited for leaders in the public health field today. But if you go through these 6, you can see that the core areas of public health being competent in applying research methods, having an area of emphasis that you can demonstrate technical expertise, being able to do adaptive leadership and be an adaptive leader, high-level communication skills, and of course the notion of personal leadership and the lifelong learning and development that goes along with that. Next, please. I think in looking at what we do in the context of framing the future, one way which we depart from the framing the future recommendations is that we focus exclusively on practice and practitioners. We don't intend our students will come into academia as either teachers or researchers, and so we tend to refer applicants who have that trajectory in their narrative statement to another DrPH program. We think it is challenging enough to be able to define the DrPH degree as a practice degree without bringing in other aspects which might be more related to the PhD. And finally, there is, we go to the next slide, please. You can get a sense that there's a lot of moving parts in our program, and we've attempted to develop this model which captures these elements and pulls them together so you can see the relationship. We, in essence, expect our graduates to think differently after they complete the program. That's the change we look for. It will impact their view of leadership and themselves as of leaders. They will understand adaptive leadership, be able to use the skills of adaptive leadership, such as systems thinking and change management, and are able to learn from their experiences and help their organizations learn so that as part of their leadership skills, they can drive change. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lenihan. We have one question to ask you now, and we'll ask any of the other ones that come through the chat box at the end of the presentation. Your adaptive leadership approach is intriguing and appears relevant across many other sectors and professions. Did you get your ideas from the business world?
Well, I think if we look at the leadership history and the vast leadership on literature, it comes from a number of sources. And we have attempted to draw from a variety of sources to come up with a definition and approach to leadership which is relevant to public health. Now, adaptive leadership has been developed most heavily in the business literature, and the authors Heifetz, Linsky, and Grayschau, I think, have the most recent book out, and so we have drawn from that heavily, but also have drawn from some of the writings that underlie adaptive leadership so that we can tailor it expressly to the needs of public health, and recognizing that a public health approach to this may be somewhat different than, say, a business approach to this, even though the concept of adaptive leadership is relevant.
Wonderful. Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. DeBate.
Good afternoon, everyone. Next slide, please. I'd like to start with our mission statement, and as reflected in the mission statement of the University of South Florida's DrPH program.
Rita, I'm sorry. We can't exactly hear you. Can you vary your distance from the microphone a little bit?
Is that better?
A little bit.
Is that better?
Somewhat.
How is that?
That's good.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so getting back to the mission statement, our program focuses on three main practice-based elements, and you can see them highlighted in red here: leadership and advocacy, evidence and an interdisciplinary approach, and public health practice within the U.S. and globally. Next slide, please. Our development and oversight for our program is the DrPH Admissions and Advisory Committee, which includes representatives from department faculty, community partners, DrPH alumni, and current DrPH students. Next slide. Before we get into the intricacies of our program, I want just to highlight that the development of our current DrPH program drew from a number of sources, including the IOM report in 2002, the DrPH competency model in 2009, the U.S. Department of Education revised definition of the credit hour, which feeds into the competency-focused curriculum structure that we have, the ASPPH Framing the Future report in 2014, and the mission centers and faculty expertise within the College of Public Health. Next slide, please. So the focus of this presentation is to highlight how we have incorporated aspects of the 2014 DrPH Framing the Future report in the revision of our program. More specifically, this presentation will highlight how our program addresses key considerations and critical content related to evidence-based practice, leadership, and community-based approaches, in addition to design elements regarding competency-based curriculum and practice-based experiences. Next slide, please. So our DrPH curriculum is structured around three core cluster areas, including advocacy, leadership, and community engagement, management and ethics, and evidence-informed public health. Next slide. Within each cluster area are clearly defined competencies that are grouped into three levels, including benchmark competencies, and on the slide are at the bottom. And those are the lower level competencies which focus on knowledge and comprehension, moving up to milestone competencies which are apply and analyze, and lastly the capstone competencies which are the higher level competencies of create and evaluate. Next slide, please. So the following three slides show our cluster areas with the particular domains within the cluster areas and the competencies. So in this slide we have our core cluster area, which is advocacy, leadership, and community engagement. And as you can see on the left-hand column of the slide, you'll see the curricular domains within this cluster, which are advocacy, leadership, communication, and community and cultural orientation. As you move across the table, you'll see the competencies represented under the benchmark, which are knowledge and comprehension, the milestone, apply and analyze, and lastly the capstone competencies. Now, based on the domains and competencies, we developed a carefully structured curriculum that was sequenced to meet those competencies. And on this slide, you can see them in the rows that are highlighted in green. So within each competency, you'll see specific coursework that was carefully designed and sequenced to meet the competencies and the levels of benchmark to capstone. Next slide, please. Here's the management and ethics cluster, and you'll see the domains management and professionalism and ethics. And again, moving across the table to the right, you'll see the competencies broken up by the benchmark, milestone, and capstone competencies, and the blue rows represent the courses, again, that were carefully designed and sequenced to meet those competencies. Next slide. And lastly, the evidence-informed public health domain, same thing set up with one domain, this critical analysis. The competencies are to the right of the table, and then the courses, again, carefully designed and sequenced to meet those competencies. So our DrPH program also was designed around prior learning assessment and recognition. And this is a really important program component because it offers flexibility within the structured competency-focused curricular design. So before I get into the details of the prior learning portfolio, I just wanted to review a little bit about prior learning assessment and recognition. So because we have a competency-focused curriculum, we wanted to assess competencies that may have occurred, that may have been met outside the traditional credit hour. And what this does is it takes into consideration experience and knowledge that they may have, the students may have had in the workforce, because we do require that our students have practice-based experience in public health prior to being accepted into the program. It enables program tailoring, and this is important because students who earn credits through prior learning are more likely to stay in and complete the programs than those who do not, because the programs are tailored to meet what exactly they need to meet the competencies that they're interested in based on the program structure. One important thing, though, prior learning assessment with competency-focused curriculum is that we need to understand that learning can and does take place outside of the classroom, and educational practices that force adults to repeat learning is not efficient and really is unnecessary. So next slide, please. So how the DrPH Admissions and Advisory Committee decided to assess prior learning and evaluate the prior learning was through the prior learning portfolio. The prior learning portfolio is completed by the end of the second semester, and it's completed in collaboration with the student's academic advisor. But basically, the prior learning portfolio is a self-assessment of all the program competencies, the domains within each cluster, and the competencies. And the student develops a narrative and provides evidence regarding meeting certain competencies. And the slide right here represents a table that has in the green columns the components of the prior learning portfolio and the description. The competencies and learning outcome part of the component of the portfolio is the really important part, because that is the self-assessment narrative that the student provides that provides specific details and insights from past experiences, which make systematic and logical connections to the theories and concepts within the DrPH competencies and associated coursework in which credit is sought. In addition to the narrative, they must provide evidence in meeting the competencies. On the right-hand side of this table, and highlighted in yellow, is the evaluation criteria that the DrPH Admissions and Advisory Committee uses to review the prior learning portfolios and determine if prior learning credit can be given. Next slide, please. Lastly, with regard to practical experiences, we do have a practice-based dissertation, but in addition to that, our program also includes competency-focused mentoring. In entering the program, each student is assigned an academic mentor. That academic mentor role is to evaluate the achievement of curricular competencies. Upon completing their prior learning portfolio, each student is then matched with a practice-based mentor so that they can work with senior practitioners and researchers in attaining opportunities to observe, engage in advanced public health skills, and develop competencies. The practice-based mentors can be the same throughout the program, or they can add new mentors as they see needed as part of their curricular development. So they could actually have more than one mentor as they progress through the program. Next slide, please. So in summary, circling back to our mission statement, our DrPH program, using the documents previously described and the Framing the Future report, prepares practitioners for leadership and advocacy in public health practice through a scientific interdisciplinary approach to understanding and solving problems in public and private sectors in the U.S. and worldwide. Thank you, and I could take a couple questions now.
Thank you, Dr. DeBate. Yes, we do have one for now. Do you have any advice for our faculty in mapping competencies to specific learning objectives across the curriculum?
Yes, this was actually a really good learning process. The first thing that you want to do is when you look at exactly what you want your program to be. And then when you develop your competencies, you want to make sure that you group them into certain areas and have them grouped so that they build upon each other. That way you can ensure that the lower level competencies are met before the student then progresses to the next level.
Great, thank you so much. And now we'll turn it over to our next presenters, Dr. Lass and Dr. Berman from the Harvard School of Public Health.
Thank you very much. If I can have the next slide. So Professor Berman and I will share the presentation duties. I will introduce the context for change that resulted in the launch of our new DrPH, and then come back at the end of the presentation to talk to you more about evaluation and our next steps in our redesign process. What we see as critical is that the launch of our new DrPH is in a larger context of rethinking all of our degree programs at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, from our master's programs, both professional and research, to our research doctorate and our leadership practice doctorate, the DrPH. Not only think about curriculum, but also how we teach. So both curriculum change, but also pedagogical innovation. And all of this took place in the context of the school preparing to celebrate its centennial. Dean Julio Frank, in the middle of September of 2010, launched what he referred to as the Roadmap to 2013, which would charge the school with a complete strategic rethinking of our educational strategy. Simultaneously and synergistically, the efforts of our school paralleled the work of ASPPH and the Framing the Future Task Force. And much of our work found inspiration from, as well as support from, the work of the Framing the Future Task Force, which Dean Frank and myself participated with. Next slide. So over a 3-year process of review and engagement with key constituent groups, the school faculty voted to launch new or redesign degrees across the full spectrum of our school's offerings, with the DrPH leading the way, serving as an incubator for experimentation and innovation on a number of key areas, from core knowledge to how we think about leadership, innovation thinking, management and communication skills, to how we think about the role of the field, as well as how we measure effective learning. So the results are the launch of our new DrPH, which just started last July 1st of 2014, the launch of a redesigned MPH that begins this summer of 2015, and a new PhD in the fall of 2016, a 5-department collaboration on population health sciences. We thought it was both symbolically but also substantively appropriate to launch with the DrPH because it was the degree that Harvard invented, and it was the first degree that the school offered in the fall of 2013 when public health education began at Harvard. With our goal here that we felt our DrPH, like many other DrPH programs, needed to be reimagined. Degrees that, while labeled practice, often had too much of a research orientation. And we saw this in landscaping of degree programs across the association, where we saw the majority of programs being department-based, discipline-based, and having more similarities with the PhD than the distinctive nature for which my colleagues at UIC and South Florida have illuminated on what the DrPH could be and will be, thanks to the leadership of the Framing the Future Task Force and the innovations that are taking place at the school level. I'm now going to turn the presentation over to Professor Peter Berman, who is the faculty director of the DrPH, and in many ways embodies the consummate nature of what a DrPH director should be, both an academic, a health economist of great accomplishment, but someone who has come in and out of academia throughout his career, including most recently returning to the school 3 years ago after a 7-year stint at the World Bank. And Peter joins us from India, where a third of our cohort is on a field-based experience. Peter, I turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks very much, Ian, and hello, everyone. In the next slide, we talk about the goals and purposes of the Harvard DrPH. The first bullet really illustrates, I think, our intention that this program should lead the students into an accelerated pathway towards leadership roles in public health with both a domestic and a global focus. So it is a school-wide program which combines students with primary interest in both domestic as well as global areas of work. I think it's worth noting that we're explicitly not trying to reach a group of mid-career students, but actually students a bit earlier in their career trajectories who have some significant prior field experience and who have a vision of themselves in future leadership roles in public health and are making a commitment earlier in their career to that kind of life course trajectory. We recognize that leaders in public health need, and increasingly in the world today, need both advanced academic training as well as competencies around enabling change. And we talk about these enabling change competencies in terms of leadership, management, communications, and innovation. They also need to have opportunities to practice both the advanced academic knowledge that they gain as well as the enabling change skills in a translational approach during their study and after. So we hope the Harvard DrPH provides a new balance, explicitly recognizing the importance of these enabling competencies, providing less emphasis than our prior doctoral degree, including our prior DPH degree, on advanced research skills and a research-based dissertation. Next slide, please. We've given the name to this approach we used to develop the Harvard DrPH as the Delta method, or the Delta educational method, which essentially builds into the overall design of the program, the coursework, and a whole series of innovative didactic experience and field practice around combining advanced academic training with these enabling change skills. And this term Delta is an acronym for the doctoral engagement in leadership and translation for action. And of course, Delta is a symbol that often signifies change, and we think that's a key keynote idea of our program. Next one, please. In developing the Harvard DrPH, we assembled a committee, a distinguished committee of faculty from the School of Public Health, as well as participants from other parts of Harvard. And what came out of the committee's work, in part, was this DrPH competency framework, which you can see here in this slide. Essentially, this framework is the guidance that we use to develop the curriculum. We have developed a much more detailed set of competencies around these three broad domains you see at the bottom part of the chart: mastering foundational knowledge, then analysis and synthesis, linking that to enabling change competencies, and finally the translational aspects of achieving valued results. The program concept really draws from a social need perspective and one on having an impact on social needs and thereby, in fact, changing or transforming those needs in a continuous cycle. And we also see a linkage between the translational efforts of leaders and the foundational knowledge, in the sense that some translation does require documentation and research on practice and translation, which then again modifies both the foundational knowledge and our knowledge about the enabling change competencies. So this competency framework is what has guided the development of the program. It's been used to develop a much more detailed list of specific competencies around three domains, and a curriculum which maps to the competencies so that we can track the degree to which the program represents its intended goals and needs. Next one, please. So just to summarize some of the key elements of the curriculum that came out of this, this design process, which, as Ian said, our first cohort only began 6 months ago in the summer of 2014. The program has a cohort design. The students come in and are expected to follow a common set of courses. About 60% or more of the 2 years of required coursework in residence are required courses for the students, which they take more or less together. We front-loaded the curriculum with theories, concepts, and methods, the foundational knowledge part, and gradually moved towards the translational elements of the curriculum. We've added cross-cutting courses in public health history and the public health enterprise, and of course attention to the 5 core disciplines in public health, as well as life sciences and ethics, which has been a requirement at Harvard School of Public Health for some time. We've developed a new program as part of the DrPH we call the Leading Change Studio. This appears as if it is a course in the curriculum, but actually it's a combination of many different kinds of activities, some formal classroom work, as well as some innovative didactic experiences like shadowing in the field, simulations, and so on. And this is the principal vehicle for developing the competencies in that enabling positive change domain. In the second year, we move much more into what we call integrating seminars and courses that link across domains, more how to use foundational knowledge and the enabling change competencies to address problems and to bring about change in the real world. Field practice is an essential part of the program. It's initiated in the middle of the first year and follows all the way through to the third year, which is devoted to the DrPH Delta project, the culminating experience of the program. As Ian mentioned, our first cohort is in the midst of their first month-long field project experience. We have one group here in India, we have another group in Brazil, and a third group working with a leading U.S. health system in Salt Lake City, Utah. We have more space for students to take advanced courses in the second year. We've added some flexibility in the design so that students could take longer time to complete their coursework if they feel they need additional skills, or take additional time devoted to their third year DrPH Delta project. We also will be using portfolioing as a method of students self-learning and tracking and monitoring their own progress, and this will be part of what they produce and submit in the final culmination of the program. Next one, please. The third year project is something we're still designing. It's going to be the main locus for this third domain, competency domain of achieving valued results. 10 months are earmarked for this field-based project experience. It will not be a residential experience at Harvard. Will be preceded by a qualifying examination, both written and oral. There will be, as part of this DrPH Delta project, a substantial written product, which we are calling a thesis, as well as a final portfolio combining earlier work and some of their own growth and experience during this 10-month-long culminating experience of the DrPH program. The goal of the project, the DrPH Delta project, is to achieve some kind of impactful public health result through translational work. This could be retrospective, that is learning from an existing public health activity, or prospective, that is designing something that might take place in the future. An evaluation will be based on peer review of both DrPH faculty and outside expert reviewers. Next one, please. So we're excited to have our initial cohort in place. We admitted 15 students who joined us in July of 2014. We were actually a bit pleasantly surprised, almost stunned, at the number of applicants that we received, and they were outstanding applicants, and almost all the students to whom we offered admission came, a very high yield rate of admission. We required prior work experience, at least 2 years. Most of the students in this initial cohort had 4 or 5 years. Their age ranges are from 24 to 39 years, 31 years old on average. We did admit several students who only had prior bachelor's degrees. Most of the students had master's degrees, but not only master's degrees in public health. We had 60% women in the class, and nearly half of the U.S. citizens who were admitted in this first cohort came from underrepresented minorities. We were fortunate in the first year of the program to benefit from a very generous launch gift. Almost all the students, all the students who came received some financial support. 7 out of 15 were fully funded for the 3 years of the program. We are now in the admission process for our second cohort, and we're looking for a class size of 20 to 25 students. And that will continue in the future. Next one, please. I'll turn it over to Ian now. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Peter. So in the closing of the element, one of the key things that we have for feedback is consummate commitment to evaluation. Okay, apologize. There seems to be actually not only a feedback loop on evaluation, but a feedback loop on my voice. But I think it's just cleared up. So just reiterating, we've taken the approach of an iterative design process. So this first cohort is experiencing what we think about as DrPH 1.0. And in many ways, they are co-creators of the curriculum with us. And we meet very regularly with the students. When they first joined us in the summer, we met weekly. We have the formal evaluation. We have an outside advisory committee for the school, which is carefully guiding our process. The committee was originally chaired by Dr. Harvey Feinberg. We have a faculty steering committee, and we're engaging heavily with our field partners and employers. Going forward, we think about how this links with our new core curriculum for the NPH, as well as the idea of a core curriculum for research education as well. So we do see the DrPH curriculum, which we discussed today, as an evolving entity in the spirit of constant evaluation and quality improvement. We also look forward to, engaging at the ASPPH level as the conversations continue around making the DrPH a truly transformative degree for the field and for our schools. And you have the web link to visit and learn more about our program. I turn it back to the moderator.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Lapp and Dr. Berman. One question before we move on to the rest. Your program is so new that any early lessons learned will be welcomed for our school, starting to differentiate our DrPH from the PhD. So any early lessons learned?
Peter, do you want to start off?
So I think that one of the lessons we've been learning, I wouldn't say learned, but we are learning as we go along, is the challenges of running a program like this with a school-wide focus combining both domestic and global interests. Our educational world is often very strongly divided between domestic and global coursework and research interests. And we're trying to realize a vision where we see public health as truly global, with learning taking place along both dimensions. And this has really been a challenge for us in designing the curriculum and also for our students. And I think it's, if we are successful in finding this, this balance, I think we'll really have entered some new and exciting territory. That's one thought. Ian?
Yeah, and I'll just add, the other thing that we've learned here is in our search for talent in the initial cohort, we accepted, as Peter noted, individuals who did not have MPH degrees, even though many of them did. And even for those who did, the need for refreshment of core knowledge and a greater focus on mastery of core knowledge, and that in our early testing of sorts, we come to see that the DrPH, at least at our school, can be that pathway to senior leadership positions without having an MPH be the stepping stone into the degree. It's an experiment we're going to continue to watch carefully. I turn it back to the moderator.
Yeah, this is Jim Rosinski. I want to thank all the panelists for 3 outstanding presentations. This is the section of the webinar in which we want to open it for comments and questions from others. But while people are collecting their thoughts and hopefully posing questions, let me ask all of our panelists a question about really their leadership focus within their programs. That was clearly an essential part of the thinking of the expert panel in putting together the report that was generated. But how do you teach that? Do you have any insights into the most effective methods of teaching leadership skills? Peter and Ian, why don't I call on you first?
Sure thing. Thank you, Jim. I think you're right in the sense that what's really interesting when you look at the UIC and South Florida and Harvard approaches is that shared commonality around leadership. And I couldn't agree more with Patrick's comments from UIC of the importance of both learning about leadership, but experiencing leadership opportunities, but also reflecting. And so the structure of our program has lent itself to both going out in field immersion, but also the opportunity for coaching as a key element of development of leadership, so that between the Leading Change Studio that Peter talked about, which is both classroom-based with uses of cases and simulations, bringing of leaders in the field into the classroom, we have a staff member who serves as a leadership coach. We have communications coaching, so that we're developing the leader not only in terms of their future role, but the idea here of a self-reflective leader would be just initial thoughts.
Patrick, do you have any additional comments?
Yeah, I'm muted too.
Patrick?
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Again.
Oh, good. All right. Well, I would just emphasize again perhaps one of the points I made in the presentation, and that is we don't believe you can teach leadership. It's not something which occurs out of a didactic experience in the classroom. Leadership is something that is learned, and what we could do is to create an environment where students who have an interest in learning leadership, a different notion of leadership than perhaps what they have discovered at the first half of their career, recognizing that a different approach is needed in order to make change in the second half of their career, establish the environment which is usually in their practice world so that they can learn that. They can take the concepts and principles and skills that they pick up in the virtual classroom, and then can practice these in the work world, and bring back then, using techniques of systematic reflection, their observations about what works and what doesn't work, and get an understanding of why, both in terms of the current context and comparing it to how they might have approached leadership in the past.
Thank you. Rita, how about at South Florida? How do you define leadership and go about teaching it?
I just wanted to follow up with that, and I agree with what was just said. And I think part of our program does emphasize the setting up an environment for developing leadership. You know, our students, our program is online, and we have a summer, a 1-week summer intensive where they come in. But otherwise, it is online, and so we want them to practice their leadership skills within their current positions. However, in some cases, some of those things cannot be practiced, so that's why it was important for us to make sure that they were partnered with a practice-based mentor, and that mentor could present them with opportunities and different places, organizations, that they can learn different leadership skills and also practice those skills within professional organizations or other positions or other opportunities that the practice-based mentor may have for them that might supplement what they would be doing within their current position.
Thank you. Do we have other questions or comments from participants?
Actually, we have quite a few questions in the queue. I'll start off with one. While we generally emphasize training our students about the importance of organizational change, the establishment of practice-oriented DrPH programs involves considerable change within SPHs. Can the panelists discuss the process of getting buy-in for the DrPH program from the faculty at their institution who have built their careers on their research skills?
Ian and Peter, you have the newest program, I believe. Do you care to comment on the question?
I think that's really an excellent question. The real challenge is that type of buy-in, and making sure that there's a good faculty match. I think maybe Peter, if you want to just jump in, because I think Peter has spoken a lot about this issue. Go ahead.
Sure.
Go ahead, Peter.
Sure. Yeah, this has really been a very important issue for us at Harvard, which has really had a very strong research orientation in the faculty. So I'd say a couple of things that we've learned in this process. The first is we've been pleasantly surprised that there are a number of faculty who have come forward just out of their own personal and strong interest in what the DrPH program is about. And this has really helped us to get buy-in more widely in the school, because some of these are very well-respected and leading research faculty who in some ways I think have been hungering for some outlet for this more leadership and practice-oriented type of education, not as a replacement or a substitute for what they're doing, but as a complement to it. I guess the other thing we've really made an effort to do is engage some of the more, what I guess you might call more traditionally research-oriented departments like biostatistics and epidemiology in the process of design and on the DrPH steering committee, so that we've been very conscious of wanting to really engage faculty in the process of making sure the DrPH program is seen as a strong doctoral program and not a sort of rather a different and not a second tier doctoral program from the traditional academic doctoral program. So that's a constant process of engagement and dialogue. But I think that there's been a pretty significant response, not from all the faculty for sure, but from a sufficient number of faculty that we have a sense that the program is welcomed and supported broadly in the school.
I'm afraid that we've run out of our allotted time.
Oh, sure.
I'm sorry that we haven't gotten to many of the other questions that are in the queue, but I would certainly encourage people to probably contact any of the panelists or me if they like, if they have particular questions that we might be able to address. Thank you for attending this webinar.
Thank you all. Thank you, Drs. Peterson, Rosinski, Lenahan, Debate, Lab, and Berman for joining us today and for your presentations. There are a considerable number of questions that we do not have time to get to today. I apologize, but there will be an opportunity to have your questions answered in person at our annual meeting in March, which I'll mention in just a moment. But as a reminder, this webinar has been recorded and will be available on the ASPPH website on the event page listing in the near future. And as Dr. Dean Rosinski noted, please feel free to contact us or any of the panelists with your questions in the meantime. We will have additional ASPPH Presents webinars. The next one will focus on the recently revised Core Competencies for Public Health Professionals released in June 2014 by the Council on Linkages between Academia and Public Health Practice, to take place at 2 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday, January 28th. There will also be an ASPPH Presents webinar featuring the Community Colleges and Public Health Report in spring of 2015. And then, as I mentioned just earlier, we hope to see you at the 2015 ASPPH annual meeting in March. There will be a session focusing on the DrPH on Monday, March 23rd at 3:15 p.m., as well as many other sessions featuring initiatives related to framing the future. Please also be on the lookout for a special call for posters showcasing work related to framing the future reports. Thank you.